Welcome everybody to this lovely room in Propnex HQ. This is probably the first time I'm speaking here, so if I'm nervous, please forgive me. All right. My name is Andrew and I'm Singaporean. I hold a real estate license in Singapore too, and I hold a real estate license in Australia for Victoria. So call me an expert, but I'm just one of the more experienced persons as far as Australian real estate is concerned from among all the group here, besides Brian, who's been in the market longer than me. Okay, so we're going to talk about rental of your investment properties in Australia, specifically Melbourne. And that's my job to answer some of the questions you have in mind when you invest in real estate in Melbourne and in Australia. So to begin with, I have to inform you that this is for education and general information, not professional advice for financial investment or tax advice as far as I'm concerned, and general in nature. So if you are going to make an investment and you need very specific professional advice like tax or financial advice, there are FAs who are fully qualified, and by law, I cannot give that kind of advice to you. So we'll move on. The rental snapshot for 2026 for the CBD, Central Business District of Melbourne, which is a very small district, and South Bank, specific to that. The vacancy rate right now is dominated by the landlords. That means if you are applying to rent a place, it's landlord dominant, and the vacancy rate is approximately 1.3%. In fact, for certain kinds of properties, it's below 1%. And to put it in simple terms, if you have 100 days, and if it's 1%, you have 1 day vacant, to put it in very simplistic terms. So it's quite hard if you're a new tenant in the marketplace to get a good rental property. You have to apply and so on. The medium rent, medium means right down the middle, the highest and the bottom, right in the middle, in the CBD is $620 per week. Down there is always per week. And in South Bank, 615. And this is largely driven by demand, by migration, incoming students, and professionals, particularly the younger set who want to be in the CBD and the center of the action. So tenant selectivity is increasing. A lot of people will be applying for any one good rental property. Maybe 15, 20 applicants who go for what we call inspection. We don't call it viewing, we call it inspection in Australian terms. And then the property managers will ask you to apply after inspection or even before, and they will shortlist and give it to the landlords to decide who to select. So it's quite a difficult time for tenants. And as written there in the last line, quality now outweighs just location alone. So we'll move on. What should owners do? So we really advise you to focus how your apartment will compete, not just using headlines, and repositioning via presentation of your investment property. And there are two tiers now. High quality stocks you'll be able to push on the upper limit of the possible rents that you can ask for your property. Quality drives leasing speed. In other words, if we put a property in CBD or South Bank and it's a quality property, we can expect it to be rented out in 2 weeks, sometimes within a week, unless there's something not so good about your property. So quality, and then you have stability of income. And very often when we put a good quality property in the market, the renewal is almost automatic with a little bit of rent increase, which is controlled by the law. We cannot just put anything we want. So it has to be market driven. So, as I was mentioning just now, this is the quality divide today. There are Tier 1 investment properties and there are Tier 2 investment properties. Premium is very important now. And a Tier 1 property, which are those generally that were built after 2015, before COVID, they've got all sorts of facilities. They come in under a particular specific list of quality that has been defined for the property. Then you will see nearly zero vacancy for these properties, less than 1%, which is fantastic. Because I ask my agent friends in Singapore, sometimes they say it takes 2 months to put a property in the market here. If I'm not wrong, correct me if I'm wrong. All right? So a Tier 1 property will command 15 to 25% rental premium over the median. That means if it's $600, you can expect $720 a week, just off the top of my head if my arithmetic is all right. And then you've got Tier 2 rental properties. If you have a Tier 2 rental property, it's not the end of the world. It's just that you are second choice, and therefore you will have a slightly lower premium. But then you paid less in those days when you bought it, so you don't really have too much to complain. It will take longer because all the tenants will rush to apply for Tier 1 properties. And then if they can't get it, they've been rejected a few times. At the same time, they might even apply for some Tier 2, or their budget may only allow them to apply for Tier 2 properties. So lower price, there is a performance gap and it takes just a little longer, but in the current market, below 1.5%. So your property will still be and should be rented out if you've got a decent agent managing it for you. So we'll move on. Do stop me if you want to ask any questions, but right now let me flow on, and then later on if you have any questions we can move on. So quality strategy is very important. If you have an older apartment and you want to rent it out and have less vacancy, then I suggest you upgrade it. It doesn't mean that you do a total renovation job. When we say upgrade, we mean maybe upgrade the kitchen a little bit and the bathroom. Because if it looks out of date, the young people who rent these apartments, I don't want to live there. They will go for something else first. It will still be rented out because demand is so high in Melbourne right now. So let's move on. Long-term returns. With good quality assets, you will get very good rental returns, definitely. So a question that I'm often asked by landlords is, how can I have a better rental yield? All right, so we say premium investment property or you upgrade. So styling, furnishing. Now, a lot of the Australians, they love their pets, whether it's a cat or a toy dog or even a big dog. And most landlords hate to have pets in their premises. Very often I have landlords say no pets. But actually by law in Australia now, even if we say no pets, the tenant has that right to ask for permission to have a pet. In which case you add a pet clause, and then you've got some things that you've got to specify about the pets and what a pet has to do to qualify to be allowed in your property. All right? Another way to increase your rental yield is to go for corporate rental. What is corporate rental? Usually there are 3 or 6 months terms. Some companies, like IT companies, may have people coming in and they want to provide accommodation to their staff. So it's more or less a corporate rental, therefore the yield is high, and I think the same is applying to Singapore too. The corporate yield, usually that will be a furnished apartment and a reasonably nicely stocked furnished apartment. A corporate yield cannot be empty like most of the rentals are in Melbourne. And the other thing you see that with corporate yield and even with non-corporate yield today, because of COVID and the experience of COVID, And a lot of people in Australia are still working from home. I have a friend who works, she's upper middle management, she's about 40, Chinese Malaysian girl born in Australia. She's upper middle management, she works for the government. And since COVID started, until today when I last met her, she has not been back to office. And she's had 2 babies in the meantime. So work from home is a very big thing now, still in Australia. So work from home means some corner where you can have a nice table, all the equipment you need to work from home. So you see WFH means work from home. And then the highest yield you can get is from short stay, whether it's booking.com or whether it's stays or whether it's Airbnb. That is legally allowed in Australia as compared to Singapore. The only thing about short stay is this. We have a stupid party called the Green Party. Sorry if you're a Green Party member. They're always complaining for those people who cannot get rentals. And then they went to Parliament in Victoria and got a 7% tax imposed on all short stays. So if your property is doing Airbnb, if you're renting out for $100, you lost $7 off the top to the Victorian government. So they're trying to push the short stay into longer rentals. But the yield is still high. The only problem with short stay is that you have to have very good refurbishing of all the consumables, linen, the cleaning, and that usually takes about 20% off your gross rental. So if you get $100, 7% to the Victorian government, then you lose 20% more. But the daily yield is so high, and even if you run at 65% occupancy, it's still the highest, but it needs very good short stay manager. So I don't recommend it now if you can avoid it. I only recommend it for my customers who are selling their properties. Because when you have a tenant in a property, it doesn't present well. And if you have students who are tenants in a property, it's usually very untidy. So we take the tenants out, we put it on short stay during the marketing time when people come to inspect. Every 3 or 4 days, the short stay property is nicely cleaned, nicely presented like a hotel room. So when you are selling, you get the better price. And I only recommend that to those who are selling their properties. We move on. I'm talking too much. Here it's written, if you have 1 more bathroom, it's $100 to $150 more. That means if you have a 2-bedroom property with 1 bathroom, you will get $100 to $150 less than 2 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms. That's as simple as that. If you're in Australia and your property is facing the north, because we are in the southern hemisphere, the sun rises from the northeast or east-northeast and sets on the east-west, west-northwest. So you get sunlight from morning to night. That's why a north-facing property commands a higher premium on sales price as well as for rental. The demand is always greater. Work from home, as they say, amenities now. Now all the tier 1 properties have got swimming pool, gym, that's already standard. And then you've got all the frills like mahjong room, golf driving range, all sorts of things in there. Mini theaters and all that. So at the tier 1 level, this is what is required. And I'm sure you'll hear more about that later on from Brian and the gang when they talk about the property that they're going to be presenting and giving you a preview. And now with cost of electricity, cost of water, all these costs have been going up in Melbourne. I'm not sure about Singapore. Energy efficiency is really important because the tenant pays for these expenses. So, another question often asked of property managers like ourselves is that how do you make sure I have the right tenant in this property? Okay, so some property managers will use different application forms, but there are different systems available. Most of us now, like ourselves, we use the electronic application, and it's captured by the system that we advertise in realestate.com. Is pushing out to the property managers, and we shortlist the applications from there. Most good property managers want to see the face of the person living there. So it is by law not possible for us to rent a property if we haven't had a physical inspection by the prospective tenant or representative of the tenant. But some good properties managers is, I want to see who is this tenant living here. This face-to-face thing is quite important to evaluate the kind of person you are dealing with who's going to be occupying your property. Because in Australia we have, I'm sure they have done here too, professional tenants, They come in, rent your property, delay paying you rent and things like that. So you've got to be very careful about these people. There is income verification. If the first preference is for someone who has income, obviously. If you have no income, then we want you to produce, for example, foreign students, you want parental guarantee. And we want to know the status of your parents, whoever is going to be guaranteeing the rental payment and any damages that will come from that. And then definitely there's a national tenancy database. There's also Equifax and some other financial tools that we can source to look at the background of the tenants. And a good property manager has to do that. So we prioritize tenant quality over speed. Right now, our job is easy because there are so many applicants. And we just shortlist based on what we want, and then we move on from there, let the landlord choose. Now, a question always asked is, what do we do about students as tenants? You can't avoid that because more than 40% of the tenant base in Melbourne and South Bank are international students and interstate students. And when they come to RMIT or University of Melbourne or even Victoria University, wherever they are, they need accommodation. And believe me, some of the best tenants are international students, in my opinion. If I have a working adult who I'm not 100% sure and doesn't have a good rental record to show to me and good income, I'll take an international student with a parental guarantee. But there are some disadvantages, obviously. You've got higher turnover of wear and tear because they're not as careful about the property as somebody who might be a working adult, generally speaking. But as a landlord, you want your rent to come in on time. On the day it's supposed to come in, you want to see that. Because you've got your loans to pay, the financing you've done, so you want that rent to arrive on time. And international students tend to pay the rents on time, generally speaking. And if you have a quality property at a top tier of the price, generally it's an international student from a wealthy family from China. That's our experience. So I would not reject them if I had them as applicants. Of course, I'll compare different ones. So what else can we say? Here, best for active investors. We'll move on. How do we manage arrears and risks? So firstly, you have to screen the applications to make sure that they are suitable to be your tenants, because you've got your loans to pay or whatever you want to return. So you want to make sure that the applicants qualify to live in your property. That's very important. Now, this one you cannot run away. You must buy landlord insurance. And good landlord insurance will cover rental arrears, damages to the property, and vacancy if they break the lease and then you need time to put the next tenant in. All that can be claimed from your tenant insurance. And we always recommend one or two companies that we work with that we feel confident they pay on claims very quickly, and that's important. So we used Harry Shield. And during COVID, a lot of landlord insurance companies cancelled some of the benefits of rental insurance, but they're all back on stream now, and Harry Shield was the only one that were paying for arrears caused by COVID, and rents that were not paid or vacancies arising from COVID situations because tenants had to go home or didn't come back or whatever. So we used Harry Shield. So this one, if you are an investment property owner, please don't say, it's about $500 a year. Very cheap actually, for the comfort that you get. We use a system that's quite new in the market, about 6 years old, as compared to other property managers. We use a system called Manage App. And in this system, we have access to the app, not the app, but the application. The tenant has access to the application, and the landlord or rental provider has access. At any time, you can log in to see your position as the rental provider. So we use this app because it's very effective. If the tenant missed the rental payment by 1 day, we get the alert. You get the alert. The tenant gets the alert, and we start chasing. So it's a very good, effective system. Escalation procedures, of course. The moment the rent is missed, phone calls go out, emails go out, and then where's the rent? We act on it very quickly because we have to face you, the investor. You've got a loans to pay, so we've got to make sure the rent is in. That's very important. When a property is rented, there's a lease sign. We have an incoming condition report that will inspect the property with pictures, notes, everything about the property is documented. Because if we have to go to court to make claims, the evidence must be there. And then every 4 to 6 months, there will be a routine inspection of the same property. We have to give notice. And when they exit the rental, there's an outgoing condition report. So that is very important. And if we do have to go to small claims, then we file a claim with insurance, and we do that. So we try not to have to end up there, but sometimes we do. And there are funny things that happen. And it's a lot of work for us, obviously. So you can manage your risk. What's the outlook? Because specific to South Bank, the presentation on South Bank in a while. What's the outlook for 2026 and 2030? I'll say it here. Right now, because of COVID, because of escalation of costs, because of the cost of land, the supply into South Bank is very limited. It has been limited for the last few years. Whatever you saw coming through in the last few years were the old plans and old developments that were committed. But after cost has escalated, supply has been very limited. All right? And quite a few people are also bogged down because of migration. The borders were stopped and all that. But now migration has been lifted. There were about 300,000 migrants into Australia per annum. Because of political protests and all that, it's now about 170, if I'm not wrong, off the top of my head, per annum. And 170,000 migrants into Australia, of which we expect about 25,000 into the Greater Melbourne space. The supply is less than 8,000 per annum. And into South Bank, I think less than 5,000 per annum for the next several years. So demand is greater than supply, for sure. And some companies in is that investment property companies are doing build to rent. They build a whole block just to rent to the market. They are your competitors, but they are coming in with more services and a higher price. They are priced above the normal rental properties. So here it says average stock may soften. Yeah, there are quite a lot of people who bought the tier 2 properties, which are still in the marketplace. So if your stock is tier 2, your demand may be a little bit softer because you're competing with tier 1 properties. All right? So high quality assets remain very resilient for South Bank. The next slide shows you private for sale supply competitors. You can see the numbers are quite small. Build to rent each year for the next few years until 2030. Total amount of apartment supply estimated, new rental supply estimated. Well, you see there's a shortfall each and every year. So if you are going to South Bank, I will say you are quite comfortable. So that's the end of my presentation. Any questions? Quick one. I'll take one or two questions.